This Parsha podcast is dedicated by my dear friend Ethan Hanan Shimon Eitan Weiss in honor of a new baby. That's right, a new baby born to Chaim and Yael Wheel. They just had their first child. It's a beautiful baby girl. On behalf of the entire Parsha podcast family, we wish them a hearty mazel tov, and we wish that this incredible family should have peace and joy and health and love, and they should continue to make their home a place where there's happiness and joy and righteousness and holiness, a home for Hashem. I have to tell you about my faux pas. My faux pas Parsha podcast. You see, last week when I recorded the Parsha podcast, I was under the mistaken impression that it was Parshas Vayakel and Pekudei. And the reason for that is because this year is not a leap year. And almost always, when it's not a leap year, it's an ordinary year, Vayakel and Pekudei are bunched together as one Parsha. It's every 30 years that even though it's not a leap year, they're separated. And I just assumed, without checking the calendar, that it was, last week was Vayakel and Pekudei. And I mentioned on the recording that we're so excited to go on to Leviticus, and we're having a bittersweet goodbye to Exodus. But it turns out last week was only Vayakel, and this week is only Pekudei. It happens once every 30 years. And I was wrong, and this is my eating crow, my faux pas Parsha podcast. I actually saw my sister-in-law Tova. She was making a kiddush for her newborn daughter Bella in Israel, and she sent the invitation on the family WhatsApp, and I saw that they had the wrong Parsha. It said Parshas Vayakel. I'm like, they forgot to write Vayakel and Pekudei. I said, you know what? I'm not gonna make a big deal about it. I'm not gonna tell them, oh, you got the wrong Parsha. But of course, it was smart of me not to do that because that would look really bad if I corrected them when they got it right. But thank God I discovered my mistake before the release of the podcast. So I hastily edited out any references of my blunder, my faux pas Parsha podcast, and therefore the people who were not live on torchzoom.com, the people that listen to the podcast, they had no idea about the faux pas Parsha podcast. Now, those of y'all who were live on Torch Zoom, maybe you picked up on it. But I will tell you, the Almighty saved me. Because the whole week up to Tuesday night when we record, 8 p.m. Central, I was under the impression it's Vayakel Pekudei. So usually when it's a double Parsha, I could select ideas and maybe even a dilemma for the Parsha podcast from either Parsha. Maybe a little bit from here, a little bit from there, one idea from here, 2 ideas from there, and so on. The Almighty saved me. Both ideas and the dilemma were from Parshas Vayakel, so it was just seamless. I just cut out that minute or two when I'm talking about how excited we are for Leviticus. You cut that out, and no one knows about the faux pas Parsha podcast. But it's time to eat crow now, and I'm comfortable doing it because I spoke to one of the rabbis in our community, and I told him what happened, and he said, "You won't believe it. I made the same mistake. I made the same mistake." So he said, if he made the same mistake, it's okay. It's fine. I could admit it. Mistakes happen. We're not perfect. This is the second time, actually, that this happened over the 9 years of the Parsha podcast. No one's perfect. And we have a faux pas here and there. That is okay. I was chatting this morning with another rabbi, and he wanted to know, like, what are you saying on the Parsha podcast? And what are you going to write in the newsletter? And he's like, it's a really hard Parsha. Of course, it's very repetitive. It seems like there's all the things that we've seen before. We read about the Tabernacle once again. This is the 5th week in a row that the primary subject is the Tabernacle. In fact, with the exception of the Golden Calf episode, it's all Tabernacle all the time for 5 weeks in a row. And a lot of the ideas and the materials and the vessels and the measurements we've read about before. So it's a bit harder, shall we say, to find nuance and insight. But every part of the Torah, every word, every letter is replete with insight, and Parshas Pekudei is no different. Last week, we started to read about the implementation of the tabernacle. We read about the vessels and the structure of the tabernacle. This week, we read about the vestements of the priest, but it starts off with an audit. It's tax season. We're doing an audit, and it's a very consequential audit. They raised all sorts of materials for building the tabernacle, and the Parsha begins. Every drop of gold, of silver, and of copper is tallied, is counted, is accounted for. Now, this is very dangerous because you recall from a few weeks ago, we don't count Jews. And even material possessions and wealth we don't count. The Talmud tells us that there's only blessing. This blessing is found only in something which is hidden from the eye. If something is revealed, everyone gets to see it, there's no blessing in it. And the example that the Talmud brings is that if you're walking into your granary and you want to know how much grain the Almighty gave you this year, once you have a firm number, the amount of bushels that you have, then there can no longer be a blessing on it. So you can't say, Hashem, give me a blessing that it should be robust and it should grow and it should be very significant. If you pray before you count, then it's a good prayer. Once you count, it's too late. There's no opportunity to make a blessing, to make a prayer. Why, says the Talmud? There's only blessing in something which is not measured. It's not weighed. It's not counted. Only in something which is hidden from the eye. And our Parsha begins. How many talents of gold? How many talents of silver? How many talents of copper? Why is there a count? Now, the tabernacle was built by Moshe. And the tabernacle is the forerunner, the precursor of the temple. And the temple was destroyed. It was rebuilt and it was destroyed again. In this initiative, in this venture, there's the capacity of destruction. And the Maharal tells us something very terrifying. How was there a possibility of destruction in the tabernacle/temple? It's because of what happens in the beginning of our Parsha. Moshe lays out how much gold, how much silver, how much copper. There's an accounting. Oh, once there's an accounting, it's not hidden from the eye. There's the possibility of it being destroyed. There's no blessing, only in something which is hidden from the eye. So why are we counting and enumerating and tallying the materials for the tabernacle? This question is addressed by the Midrash. And the Midrash says something quite terrifying, surprising, baffling. There was this incredible fundraising drive. Moshe announces to everyone, we need these materials, the gold, the silver, the copper, the various different wools, skins, wood, oil, spices, precious stones. And people come in droves to contribute. And they put all the material, it's like Fort Knox, so much gold, so much silver, so much precious items. They put it in the room. And who's there overseeing it? Moshe. And Moshe overheard some scoffers, some ruffians, some rabble-rousers, some jokesters and pranksters. They see Moshe walking in. Oh, I bet he's skimming a little bit off the top. He's embezzling a little bit for his own pocket. He's just, taking his cut. That's what one guy said. And the other guy says, we're going to accuse Moshe? Don't you know that he's Moshe? He deserves a little bit. Both of those two chaps were under the impression that Moshe was taking a little bit of the money allocated, of the valuables allocated for the tabernacle for his own pocket. And even though Moshe was trusted by God, the verse says about Moshe, in all of my house, God says, he is the trustworthy one. And Moshe, this is Moshe, the greatest man who ever lived. Still the scoffers were accusing him. And Moshe overheard that. And he says, when we're done, I will make an account for every single drop of gold, of silver, of copper that came here. It's all going to be tallied. It's all going to be accounted for. There will be a complete and thorough audit. And unlike the Pentagon, we will not fail the audit. And this is why, the Midrash says, the first verse of our Parsha calls the Mishkan, the tabernacle, Mishkan ha'edus, the tabernacle of testimony. This will testify. This will serve as evidence to absolve Moshe from any hint, from any claim of guilt. He embezzled nothing. But if you think about it, what's the consequence of what happened over here? Think about the damage that was done to our people by these scoffers. You have some people who made snide comments. And these aren't evil people. We're told that they're scoffers. A scoffer is someone who just throws out questions without a firm opinion. They didn't accuse Moshe. They said, well, maybe, how do we know? And they have the ability to wiggle out of it and say, well, I didn't accuse him officially. I just said, well, he's there by himself, right? Look at him. He seems to be doing well. Where did he get all the finances from? He seems to be nice and healthy. Where's he eating and drinking from? It's all on our tab. Maybe, I don't know, maybe. According to, I guess, certainly the Maharal, he makes the calculation. This accounting was done because of the scoffers. And this accounting took the tabernacle and its successor, really the temple, and removed blessing from it. Blessing is only in things that are not counted and measured and weighed. And this allowed for the destruction of the temple. Accordingly, it's very terrifying to think that these scoffers, these jokesters, they contributed to this terrible damage that happened because they caused the need for Moshe to do the audit. And some have pointed out that this is not the first fundraising effort in the book of Exodus. You recall when some of the members of the mixed multitude, when they wanted to make a golden calf, they did a fundraising effort as well. Give me the gold. We're going to make a golden calf. And isn't it interesting that there were no scoffers and there was no audit and no accounting? It's interesting. Maybe it's a bit tragic when it comes to the tabernacle, to building a house for God, where God says, I will dwell amongst you. For something as righteous and as noble and as holy and as important as this, the scoffers come and say, well, how do we know? Is our money really going to a good cause? We have to look. We need some transparency. But somehow, when it comes to the golden calf, everyone turns aside. There's no problem. We don't have any questions. But the Midrash tells us that Moshe's behavior here shows us the importance of not only being righteous and upstanding and living with integrity when it comes to you versus God, so to speak, in the eyes of God, but you have to be clean even in the eyes of others. You must have scrupulous, fastidious integrity in monetary matters, and that should be not just in the eyes of God, but also in the eyes of man. My grandfather, of blessed memory, during the war, he was in Sweden, in Stockholm. And he had been a student in the Great Mir Yeshiva in Poland, but because he was a German citizen, they kicked him out of the country. And he found his way to Sweden. And he didn't know why the Almighty positioned him there, but once the war began, he served a vital role in helping many, many hundreds, if not thousands of people survive the war, survive the inferno. And in particular, he was a crucial link between the many Jews, and especially the Mir Yeshiva, his alma mater, that had traveled across Asia to Japan, and Japan occupied China, and they had no funds. It's not great. It's always hard to fundraise for yeshiva, certainly not in Shanghai or Kobe, Japan. So there were Torah giants in the United States that were fundraising millions of dollars, but they had no way to ship it to China, occupied by Japan, or to Japan itself, because they were at war. So they would ship it to Sweden, to my grandfather of blessed memory. Sweden was neutral, and he would repackage it and ship it to Japan. And at the end of the war, he came to Rabbi Kalmanovich, who was the head of the Varatzala, of the effort in America to secure the funds and to do the salvation efforts. He came to him like Moshe, with every date and every penny, every nickel, every dime, every quarter, everything with absolute meticulous fastidiousness, to show how he didn't take a single drop of any of these funds, what went in, what went out, with absolute sterling integrity. It's a lesson, of course, for us, but I want to tell you first another story that I read today for the first time. This story I liked a lot. And I never knew the story, so I'll share with you right now on this faux pas edition of the Parsha podcast, pro edition of the Parsha podcast. The great Hasidic dynasty of Ger, or Gur, it's the largest in Israel. So one of the previous Rebbes, he was known as the Beis Yisrael. His name was Israel. And the book that he wrote was called Beis Yisrael, the House of Israel. And he was known as the Beis Yisrael, the House of Israel, after his book. And he was once visiting a fellow Hasidic master. And most Hasidic masters, they have there's a certain decorum, but also a certain princeliness that they have in their court. So they would have, a gabbai, someone who's they would have a sextant, someone who's there to help them, someone who's like a chief of staff, and they would have like an army, a coterie of helpers, travel with a nice retinue. Because after all, this is the Hasidic master, the head of the court. But he was visiting a different Hasidic master who didn't have that. They had a different way of service. So it was just him. So the great rabbi visits the other great rabbi, and the other great rabbi says, I want to make you a cup of tea. I'm going to go to the kitchen to make you a cup of tea. Which is very unusual for a great Hasidic master to go make a cup of tea by himself, but that's the way it was done over there. So the great rabbi goes to make the cup of tea, and the other great rabbi follows him into the kitchen. And there's the unusual sight where these two giants, these two Hasidic masters are in the kitchen together. And he says, what are you doing here? Go back to the living room. I'll make you your tea. He says, no. In the living room, I saw some of your Hasidim, some of your followers, they placed some money there for charity. And I don't want you to think, when you tallied up, what happened when I was in the kitchen. And I know for sure you wouldn't accuse me of taking any of that money, but I don't want you even to have to think that I'm not accusing you of that. My interest in making sure that I'm absolutely clean in these matters extends so far as to say, I don't want you even have to think that there's no way that the Beis Yisrael would even consider it. Don't even think about him not taking it. So I'm going to be with you. I'm not going to be with the money by myself. And it's an idea to get us started. Now, if you look at the actual audit, it's an audit for gold and for silver and for copper, the three precious metals. And the verse tells us, this is 38:24, how much gold was amassed? 29 talents of gold and 730 shekels of gold. And the very next verse, verse 25, it tells us the amount of silver. 100 talents and 1,775 shekels. And the next verse tells us, well, what did they use the silver for? They used 100 talents for 100 silver sockets. Each socket was a socket that went under the beams, the vertical beams, the crushim. Each one was 1 talent. So 100 talents for 100 sockets. And the rest, the 1,775 shekels, were used for hooks for the pillars. And then it tells us, well, how much copper was donated? 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. And that was used for the sockets, for the entrance, the copper altar, and the vessels, and sockets for the courtyard, and pegs for the courtyard curtains. That's what you read. And this is a lot of people, most years it's the second part, the second Parsha. People read this so fast. You ask them, well, how many talents of gold were donated? Most people just would have no idea. Even people that know the Torah really well say, okay, how much gold, how much silver, how much copper were done? These are verses in the Torah. How much were donated? Most people wouldn't know. I wouldn't know. It's like numbers. It's like that part of the Torah. You just run through it. But if you study it, if you analyze it, you'll notice that there's a difference between gold and silver and copper. Because the gold, it tells us how much gold was assembled, but it doesn't tell us, it doesn't identify where that gold was used. Whereas by the silver and the copper, it tells us how much copper, how much silver. It was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels. That's the silver. And 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. That's the copper. And it tells us what they were used for. But the gold, it says only the amount and not what it was used for. Why is there a distinction, a difference between gold versus silver and copper? It's a clever question. And I saw 2 very nice answers to this question. The first answer goes back to the ark. As we know, the ark is the first vessel that was mentioned in the list of vessels for the tabernacle. The ark was in the Holy of Holies. It had a crown around it. It had a cover. It had, of course, the cherubs hewn out of a single block of gold. It had the 2 staves, the 2 poles on either side, the staves that cannot be removed. And inside that box, of course, well, you had the tablets, both sets of tablets. How would you measure how much gold is in the ark? So you would think, first of all, you'd have to take out the wooden part of it, because there was wood in there as well. But you have to put it on a scale, right? You have to put it on a scale. But we know that the ark had a miraculous property that it would float. It would lift those that lifted it. And therefore there's no way to measure, to weigh the actual ark. Moshe can never show them how much gold was in the ark. And therefore there's no way to measure it. And therefore there's no way to prove it. So the list is only how much gold, but not what it was used for. Interesting answer. But the second answer was very powerful and counterintuitive, but something that I think we see in our life as well. They say that if you have a lot of different clients in your business, the biggest clients sometimes give you the fewest problems. And the small clients are always complaining and always all these problems and they don't pay on time. And anyhow, I wouldn't know, but that's what I've heard. People who donated gold, they were big givers. They never complained. They never asked. They never inquired. They never said, well, what's he using it for? I made a donation. I want to make sure it's used not for Moshe's, to line Moshe's pockets. I want it to be used for the actual tabernacle. Those people didn't have that question. They were big givers. The smaller givers, the silver givers, the copper givers. Their lack of generosity it's actually manifested in their complaints. The fact that they're complaining, it's just another angle of the fact that they're actually not such big givers, which was very interesting to me, an interesting suggestion. And we move on. After the accounting, the audit, we read about the building, the weaving, the construction of the 8 vestiments of the high priest. And it starts off with the ephod. The ephod is the apron-like garment. And this was made out of gold and all the different wools and linen. It was actually made out of shatnez, wool and linen together, which is a separate subject. But the verse tells us, how do you make a garment out of gold? Gold is a metal. You don't really wear metal garments. So the verse tells us that they would hammer out sheets of gold, make the gold very, very, very thin, and then they would cut it very thin and turn it into a thread. And they used that thread to weave into the ephod garment. They actually mixed the threads, the gold thread, with the various wool threads and linen threads. And they made yarns. Rashi describes exactly the different components of the yarns. But the verse describes here just the novel way, the interesting way that they would take gold, which is a metal, and turn it into a thread. And there's a Ramban, a comment of Ramban, which I never saw before. First time I saw it today. And he says, wait a minute. It's describing to us the process by which they made thread. In none of the other parts of the tabernacle, not the tabernacle walls, not the covers, not the vessels, not the vestments, in none of them were told exactly what they did, how they made it. They used a knife, or they used an axe, or they used this tool or that tool. The only time they were told the methods that the artisans, the craftsmen used to arrive at the finished product, it's only how they made golden thread. And why? Why is it different? It should have just said, well, they made the ephod, and it's just how they were told to make it. Why are we told how they made the materials that they used to make the ephod out of? Why is this different? Which I thought was a very interesting question, and one that I did not ask myself. Because again, like this Parsha, many people say, it's almost Pesach time. We're talking about Pesach stuff. We're still hungover from Purim. Usually it's bunched together as the back half, the back end of the double Parsha. So people don't ask these types of questions, but it's the Ramban. And he says an amazing answer. He says, I want to speculate. I want to suggest. This was a new idea that was never done before. They invented a new way to make golden garments, to make it paper thin, to hammer till it's paper thin, and then to cut it very, very thin to make it into a thread. Moshe tells him, God tells Moshe, Moshe tells them, make a garment out of gold. And use the gold like you use wool and linen, like you use fabric. But gold is just not a fabric. And they invented this new way, this new insight, this new method for making gold a fabric. And it was never done until that day. And because it's so novel, it's so different, the Torah tells us about it. That's what the Ramban says, which I thought was very interesting. And I thought maybe we could suggest maybe a deeper insight into what he's saying, or maybe the lesson behind it. Gold is a metal. And the metal is just not a thread, at least not up to this point. But somehow what they did, what the artisans and the craftsmen and Betzalel and all the people who were part of this monumental effort, what they did is they took gold and they managed to weave it in, to make it interwoven into the garments. We know that the relationship that the body has with the soul is similar to the relationship that the body has with the garment. We know that you could have 12 pairs of shoes. I've been told some people have that. Multiple pairs of trousers. A few cardigans. A nice suit for Pesach. Multiple hats even. 15 neckties. You can have lots of different garments, right? But only one body. And the body is you, and the garment is just something which goes on top of it. Really, that's the soul and the body. The soul is you, and the body is just the garment that goes on top of it. And maybe you could even have multiple garments. You could swap them out, or they change. It's different. Out of style. When I was younger, a little bit different. Now I got the salt and pepper, silver fox look. The body is analogous to a garment. Now, of course, we're not trained to think like that. To us, like because of the Yetzer Hara, we think of ourselves as the garment. We forget about who we actually are, which is the soul. But the garment is symbolic of a body. Body is physicality. And our physicality, that's the element that can cause distance between us and God. If we didn't have a body, if the soul was freed from the clutches of the body, if the soul was released from bodily incarceration, the soul would soar. The body is the limitations. The body is the disruptions and the inhibitions to the full power of the soul. Maybe we can suggest that with the tabernacle, we learned that the gold, that righteousness, goodness, holiness, the soul can be woven into every thread and every stitch of the body. The lesson of the tabernacle is that even here in this world, there can be holiness. There can be the presence of God. God could dwell amongst us. Us? Who are we? What are we? Why are we deserving of that? Well, maybe we're not. But that's the insight. That's the novelty. The gold can be woven in to every part of the fabric, every stitch, every thread of the garment even can be impacted and influenced and elevated by the gold. An idea, a suggestion based upon this interesting Ramban. And we proceed. We read about the ephod, the shoulder pads of the ephod. You recall there are 14 precious stones, 12 of them on the choshen, on the breastplate, and 2 of them on the top shoulder straps of the ephod. And the verse tells us that on the shoulders of the ephod, you place 2 shoham stones, which are called avnei zikaron, which means remembrance stones. Remembrance stones. Now, what does it mean, remembrance stones? So the simple interpretation, what most of the commentaries go with, is that, well, what does it say in those stones? It says the names of the 12 sons of Jacob. And whenever the high priest wears it, the memory of these holy people is invoked, is remembered, and their righteousness and their worthiness is presented, so to speak, before God. And that's a form of prayer, if you will. But I saw a new interpretation. There's another way to look at the remembrance stones. It's not remembrance for God per se, or at least this other interpretation, so to speak. It's a remembrance for us. Remember, O Israelite. Remember where your name is. Remember where your name goes. Remember who you come from. Remember what you can become. Remember what your destiny is. Remember that your name, or the name of your antecedents, it's etched on the ephod. It enters the temple. It is on the shoulders of the high priest. If you remember that, think about what that does to you. Think about how elevated you are. Are you going to go sin now? Behave with pettiness when you realize just what a prince or princess you are? And what a role you have to play? You recall perhaps Joseph when he was about to capitulate and succumb and yield to the seductions and the proposition of Mrs. Potiphar. An image of his father was conjured in the window. And the image told him, the hologram told him, there will be a high priest in the nation spawned by you and your brothers. And he will have an ephod. And on the ephod there will be stones, and it has your name on it right now. You sin, you're out. And that gave Joseph the inspiration to overcome. And yes, he was imprisoned for 10 years because of that. But he remains a hero for all time because of his valiant strength of character and fortitude to overcome. He remembered where he came from. He remembered what is expected of him. He remembered the great legacy and destiny and mission of the people of Abraham. And these are stones for us to remember as well. It's a new way to overcome sin. It's a new way to overcome pettiness. Remember that you are a prince. What saved Joseph? He remembered that he was a prince. He remembered that he was a diamond. And that knowledge elevates a person and gets them to ascend above the pettiness promoted by the evil inclination. There's a story we've told in the past. It's a tragic story. It's a sad story. It's one of the saddest episodes or certainly saddest series of events that happened to our people. And that's with the destruction of the Second Temple. The Romans come and they just destroy all of Judea. Slaughter, pillage, absolutely eviscerate Judea. Millions, maybe even, were killed. Enormous amounts of Jews were sold as slaves. The great sages, many of them were killed in very brutal, horrific manners. Including the last high priest of our people, Rabbi Yishmael. Interestingly, his name Ishmael, but he's one of us. Rabbi Yishmael, the son of Elisha. He was the last high priest of our people. And the way he was killed, it's very macabre. But he was flayed. He was flayed. Because he was so beautiful. His face was shining. Was brilliant. Why was it brilliant? Because where did he go? He walked into the Holy of Holies. He went to the holiest place. Anyone who walks in there emerges like an angel. If they survive, of course. He was unbelievably beautiful. And the executioner's daughter said, you can't just kill him. You have to, I need his skin. So they skinned his whole face off. So she could preserve it, this beautiful visage. But his children were equally beautiful. And the son and the daughter were each sold as slaves to two Romans. And these two Romans were chatting about the beautiful slaves that they had. And one guy's like, well, I have this male slave. He's just incredibly gorgeous. And the other guy's, well, I have this female slave and she is unbelievably gorgeous. So he said, you know what? Let's put them together. And we'll split the babies. Not literally. You take half, I take half. And they put them in a room together, let nature take its course. And these siblings, a brother and a sister, they didn't know that they're being placed in a room with someone. It's dark. They don't know what's happening. And they each stay in their corner. And the girl says, I am a descendant of high priests. I come from Aaron. My father is the last high priest of our people. I'm going to spend time with this slave. And he says the same thing. I'm a son of the high priest. I'm a descendant of high priests. I come from Aaron. I'm going to spend time with this slave woman. And the whole night they're weeping, each in their corner. And then at dawn, the Talmud records and documents. They discovered each other and they embraced each other and they actually just cried until they passed. This is a tragic story, but it's showing us a way of living a very elevated life, of remembering that I'm special, I'm a prince, I'm a diamond. I'm not going to act like a degenerate. I'm special. My name appears where? On the ephod, on the shoulders of the high priest. If someone has the attitude and they remember that, that is a new way to overcome challenges. Not to pummel the challenges, not to face up and man up and overpower the challenges. No, it's so below me. It's beneath me. That's a very powerful tactic, even though today we don't have a temple, at least as of this recording. We don't have a temple, and we don't have a high priest, and we don't have an ephod, but somewhere those stones still bear our name. You remember that. Remember where you come from. Remember who you are. That will help you to live a more elevated life. One more quick idea. I've said it in the past, but it's such a favorite of mine. I can't withhold. I have a weakness for this idea. The tabernacle is finally finished. We started reading about it in chapter 25 of Exodus, and it goes all the way to the end of Exodus with the exception of the episode of the golden calf. It's all tabernacle all the time. And when the tabernacle is actually finished, all the artisans and craftsmen who worked on it brought it to Moshe. We finished our job. And Rashi says something very interesting. They brought it to him piecemeal. They made all the different pieces, but they didn't assemble it into a tabernacle. If someone gives you a job, build me a tabernacle. These are all the instructions. You build them a tabernacle. They built the components of a tabernacle, not an actual tabernacle. Rashi says they brought him all the pieces separately because they tried to put it all together and they weren't able to do it. And the reason for this is because these beams, these krushim, as they're known in Hebrew, they're massive, like 20 feet tall and thick. Each one's a massive piece. It was so heavy, they couldn't lift it. And they tried, and everyone tried. Because they want to show Moshe the finished product, right? You're hired to do a job. You don't just come with the pieces. You do the job. But they all tried. Everyone tried. They couldn't do it. So they come to Moshe, we have all the pieces, but we can't assemble it. So Moshe comes to God and says, well, this is not assemblable. I don't know if that's a word. We made up a new word. Assemblable? You know what that means, right? Assemblable. You can't assemble it. This cannot be done by a human. So God says, no, we're going to do a partnership. Lift the beam, and it will look to everyone like you're lifting the beam, but really I will be doing the heavy lifting. So Moshe starts lifting the beam, and he picks it up like it's a toothpick. But really he's giving a tiny bit of effort. God is lifting the beam. That's what Rashi says, based upon a midrash. Now, this is very fascinating, and the point, and I've said this in the past, and I know the Parsha podcast archivists are like, well, you said that 3 years ago or 5 years ago. That's fine. I like it. I like it so much. I want to say it again. Forgive me. Hit fast forward. There's an amazing question. This cannot be assembled. It's way too heavy, Rashi says. It's too heavy. People couldn't do it. And when Moshe does it, well, the Almighty helps him, so he's able to do it. But we know this is a portable tabernacle that you must disassemble and reassemble every time you travel. And for dozens of times over the course of the Torah, the cloud moved and they had to follow the cloud, and they went and they disassembled the tabernacle. And some of the parts of the tabernacle they put onto wagons, others they carried on their shoulder. They traveled and they reassembled it. And that was done by the Levites. So if it's too heavy, how do they do it? They couldn't do it now. How come they could do it on all the other stops where they stopped in a new place, reassembled the tabernacle? So my favorite answer to this question is that when someone does something for the first time, it's completely different. It's a different experience. It's a different challenge than every subsequent time that they do it. Going from 0 to 1, it's almost impossible. And the reason for this is when you introduce something new, a positive thing, a new thing to the world, you're taking a part of the world that was dominated by the other side, by the Satan, by the Yetzer Hara, and you are evicting that force from the world. And thus, 0 to 1, the first time you do something, you will face resistance, the likes of which you will not face in any subsequent time that you do that same thing. The Satan understood that the building of the tabernacle is a base, so to speak, for the presence of God in this world. And thus, it is a severe reduction in the rogue dominion of the foreign God. And the Satan and the Yetzer Hara were not happy about that at all. And they embedded themselves in those crush them, in those beams, and made it completely immovable. And the strongest Mr. Universe, Mr. Israel came, muscles pulsating from every part of their arm. Couldn't do it. Wouldn't budge. Not even an inch. They wanted to show Moshe a finished product. They couldn't. They tried. Everyone tried. I found a source today that said all 600,000 together tried. Nobody can move it an inch. And they come to Moshe, and Moshe couldn't either move it an inch. But God says, okay, Moshe, I'm going to do this. You put the effort. You pretend that you're doing it. But really, I am doing it. The beginning of any venture is hard. Why is it hard? Because the beginning of a venture is a decision, a positive venture that is a decision to say, I'm going to expand the area that God's presence is felt in this world, and I'm going to reduce and minimize the area in which the foreign God rules. And that, the first time, will elicit a very severe challenge from those forces. They're like a caged lion. Don't want you to do it. The Midrash says that when Abraham was told to circumcise, it was understood that this would be a life-threatening event. And in fact, I did see a Midrash this year that says that there were many people that tried to circumcise, and every single person who tried to circumcise bled out and died. Now, we know today circumcision is very routine. They do it in the hospitals, no big deal. Of course, we don't do it in the hospital, we do it with the mohel at 8 days. But it's not a complicated surgery. The act of saying, I'm going to make the presence of God in my body in a permanent way. The first time that was done, the Satan said, this is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Everyone who tries will die. And Abraham came to God, and God says, I'm going to do it with you. In a way identical to Moshe. Moshe is like lifting the beam. You can't do it. Humans can't do it. But the human says, God, I need your help. God says, I'll do it. And you just pretend. You play along. Pretend that you're doing it. Really, it's me. Really, it's me. Really, God. erected the tabernacle. Moshe only made it look like he was doing it. Abraham did the same thing. And everyone has to know, if you want to undertake an initiative 0 to 1 the first time is the hardest, because that is a effort. That's an experiment, an attempt to rid the world of forces that don't want to be gotten rid of. And thus, the first time is the hardest. But just as the first time is the hardest, the first time we have extra special divine support. Every subsequent time that they had to assemble the tabernacle, there was no need for this extra special dosage, boost of divine aid, because that mountain had been climbed before. That 4-minute mile had been broken before. The first time is the hardest, but also the first time you get the most divine help. And that brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the dilemma. Yes, at the end of every Parsha podcast in year 9, we have a dilemma. And this dilemma, the dilemma, as it's known across the pond, is the most vexing dilemma of them all. We all know that we're here to improve, to perfect ourselves, to find our good qualities and develop them and hone them and bring them to life, to actualize them. And we each have a different set of shortcomings, of flaws, of areas that need improvement. How do you find what you need to work on? That's a serious question and a vexing question for someone who's serious about doing what the Almighty created them to do. And we find an answer to this dilemma, at least one answer, one angle to this dilemma in our Parsha. Moshe makes an accounting, an audit. Why does he make an audit? Because some people said, well, maybe Moshe is stealing. He's embezzling. He's skimming something off the top. What does it take for someone to make that accusation? This is Moshe. It's astonishing that anyone that's been part of this nation and see what Moshe has done and see his track record would possibly make that accusation. And the Midrash says that there were two people. One guy said he's probably stealing. And the other guy says, well, he deserves it. Both seem to accuse Moshe of theft. The only question is it justified or not? How does that happen? Are they nutso? Are they cuckoo? Are they crazy? This is an example of a principle. The flaws that a person tends to have internally, they project onto others. If a person is someone with maybe less than sterling integrity, that is what they will accuse others of having. It's called projection. My grandfather used to call it the magic lantern. What's inside gets projected outside. This is in the Talmud already. The Talmud says that when you disqualify others, it's a sign that you yourself are disqualified. And specifically the area that you target in others, that is the precise area that you yourself are flawed in. Now, this is what the Talmud says, and this is perhaps the reason why these people made that accusation. Because they were people that needed to work on their integrity, on their honesty. Keeping their hands to themselves, not pilfering from others. And, of course, by Torah law, to steal doesn't mean to go to their bank account and to clean it out, or even to take something out of their pocket. If you use something that's not yours, that's theft. If you borrow something, I want to borrow your pen so I could sign a check, and you also doodle with it, by Torah law, that's theft, because you borrowed it for this purpose, not for that purpose. Theft is a very serious subject in our religion. The Almighty of course, we remember the verdict condemning the generation of the flood to destruction was that they were stealing. There was a robbery and theft that was rampant. This is a serious thing. And some people have a weakness for this. How would you discover that you have this weakness? If you could accuse Moshe of it, you definitely need to work on that. And it's always troubling to learn about a flaw that you may have, but it's an important principle for us to remember. Maybe some of y'all are flawless. I'm taking the other side. Why? Because we're here to work on something. If you're flawless, you don't belong here. You belong elsewhere. You're an angel. You don't belong here. So if you're here, you probably have something that you need to work on. And that's a sign of the system working. That's a feature, not a bug. And everyone wants to work on something else, something different. How do you discover the precious knowledge, the precious insight as to what it is you need to work on? This is a tool. This is a method. The flaws that you tend to see in others are flaws that you likely harbor within yourself. It's a good little heuristic to keep track of. If you always meet people that are angry, everyone that you know seems to be angry. Buddy, I know what you need to work on. If everyone that you meet is impatient, I know what you need to work on. If you notice people, oh, this guy's probably stealing, or this guy's probably taking this. If you accuse others of dishonesty, that might be an area that you need to work on, and so on. The flaws that you have within, you project outwardly. It's a very valuable insight. It's a very valuable piece of knowledge. It's in the Talmud. It's found elsewhere as well in the Midrash, other literature. Kol posel b'mumo posel. Whoever disqualifies others, they disqualify them in the precise flaw and blemish that they have within themselves. And that is good to know. We don't judge others. But the things that we, even without choosing to judge others, we just end up doing it. That is very valuable information that you retain and say, wait a minute, maybe, just maybe, this is an answer to the most vexing question, the great dilemma of them all. What am I here to do? We say goodbye, this time for real, to this cycle of Exodus. I will repeat what I said last week in the now deleted version of the podcast. It's sad to depart from Exodus, but it's very exciting to embark on the wonderful journey that is Leviticus. I'm looking forward to it. Please God, together with y'all in good health and in good spirits, please God, next week we'll gather together for Parshas Vayikra, this time for real, for Parshas Vayikra in the book of Leviticus. And we depart from Exodus and we hope to come back, please God, next year in good health and good spirits. Hopefully we'll be alive. Maybe Messiah will be there by then, but that doesn't mean that we stop studying. Nothing's going to change in that domain. In fact, I assume we'll have a bigger audience because there'll be more people that will be interested in it. But again, we don't know if we'll be there. We don't know. We're not guaranteed that we'll live till tomorrow. We don't know. We hope and we pray to be able to do this for many, many years and many, many weeks. And please, next week, Parshas Vayikra, book of Leviticus. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day. Have a delightful, uplifting, and meaningful Shabbos upcoming. And please, God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll talk again next week. And my email address is Rabbi Wolbe, spelled WOLBE, @gmail.com. I look forward to your questions and comments and your feedback.